Hey, Shop Talk listeners. We don't actually have a slideshow presentation today. We're just focused solely on our special guest, Basm Mohsen, who has joined us today. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. Hey, Basm, how's it going? Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, as I mentioned, we're doing things a little bit differently. What I was hoping to do in this webinar is basically get your story and hopefully inspire some of our listeners to do what you're doing and to kind of I guess see what you've done, maybe how you've done it, how you look at scanning as a service and things like that, and kind of learn from your experience. So basically,
Yeah,
what I wanted to do is just kind of start with your Matterport story, essentially, right? I mean, where did you first hear about Matterport? How did you get into it? How did you discover Matterport?
it was a little over 3 years ago. At the time, I was living in New York. I was working with a real estate technology company. And in a webinar kind of like this, where they were doing a demo of the product, someone in the Q&A asked, "Hey, is this compatible with Matterport?" And I had never heard of Matterport at the time. But I quickly opened up a new tab, typed in Matterport, and landed on the Matterport website. And the moment I played one of those demos, I was just so impressed uh, by the tech and just how realistic it is that that very night I purchased my first Matterport camera. And when I look back to the first time I experienced a Matterport tour, that experience kind of fades after trying it out a few times, but it's very impressive the first time around. And that's something that a lot of people in the industry tend to forget is, how cool this product really is when you see it for the first time. So, seeing it just pulled me, and I figured if I'm impressed by this, then I could definitely sell it. And, as soon as I got the camera, I think it was a week later, I started to go around to real estate, residential real estate offices that I had worked with in the past through another business, and started to offer the service. And they were interested. And I think, as everybody has seen in the industry, probably the most popular vertical for Matterport is residential. It's these days you mention the name Matterport and people know what it is in the residential field.
So you had some kind of connections. You had a small network in residential real estate, or was that just real estate in general? Did they do corporate or commercial as well?
I had another business at the time where I would install LED displays for residential real estate brokerages. And it would be those ones that you put in the windows where you slide a piece of paper in it and it has all the listing information. And so I started to think, how cool would it be to have a QR code in this listing where you can scan it and the tour pops up? And that's kind of how VirtualSpace started. But we quickly jumped into other verticals like restaurants and bars and salons and gyms and pretty much everything else. That was all open.
So you saw, because at the time, I think Matterport was pretty much focused on residential real estate. That's where they saw,
Mhm.
that the wow factor that you were saying. I mean, I remember the CEO at the time talking about that, how he presented it to a bunch of agents, I think, and it was like this audible gasp, as they first saw the tech. But you're saying that you saw a lot of promise, not just in residential real estate, but also in commercial real estate, salons, gyms, and whatnot.
Yep. And that's really where our success came from. It was, everything outside of residential. It seems like residential is kind of the low hanging fruit. And so there's a lot of companies, focus just on that, and it's great. But there's so many other verticals that can make use of, this Matterport technology and digital twins and all the use cases that come with it.
So you got the camera, you said, a little bit more than 3.5 years ago. You started scanning. Initially, it was just you and your wife initially that were scanning. Did you have one or two cameras, or how long did it take you to go from the one camera to the two cameras, and you were both out there scanning?
I think it was pretty evident that we needed a second camera, as soon as possible. And so I think it was maybe 2 or 3 months. We had purchased a second camera at the time.
Wow.
And I think it was the Lite. It was the Pro 2 Lite.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So you got the camera. You're just knocking on every door of every business at the time. So you're only 2 to 3 months into this when you get your second camera. At that time, how much of your business would you say was, salons and gyms versus residential real estate, where you pretty much had your initial network of agents and brokerages?
I think at the start, residential was kind of the easiest to pitch to. I would say half of our business was residential, and then the other half was just random spaces, restaurants, some hotels, wedding
Okay.
venues. There was a good amount of variety in there.
Did you see any kind of returning customers in commercial versus residential? Customers that you had serviced and scanned for them before, that they would come back and say, "Hey, I've got another place that I'd like you to scan."
So residential for sure. Outside of that, though, it was more of one-time captures. Every now and then, a space would renovate or change something up and want something rescanned. But for the most part, we've seen that it's residential that has people coming back to order multiple scans.
Okay, so residential has a lot more returning customers versus it's probably a lot more effort put into the marketing and going door to door with commercial spaces.
Yeah, and this is at the start. I mean, these days there's so many different types of customers. Construction is one of them. That's a client that would need progress monitoring, and you'd go there every 2 weeks, every month, once a week. So there's a lot of opportunities for recurring business from the same client in other verticals. Interior designers are kind of similar to residential in that every week, hey, we've got a new project and we need it captured. So it's kind of similar.
Did you find that to be a challenging transition, going from, you started with residential real estate, but very quickly went to commercial. How was the transition from commercial to construction? Because that's a completely different vertical.
Yeah. Construction is a different animal, and it requires a lot of knowledge, in the industry itself. And it was actually a reason for starting a second company called Virtual Asset Management, which focuses primarily on the architecture, engineering, and construction industries, just because they're a little more complicated than these one-off captures that you do for everything else.
We'll get into like scanning differences and how you kind of worked on your skills and experience and scanning the different spaces in a minute. So you started in New York. You were in New York when you first started 3.5 years ago.
Yeah, mm-hmm. That's where most of the team is located today.
So from New York, you're now in several other geo locations. You're across the East Coast. At what point did you say to yourself, okay, New York isn't big enough, we need to move, it's time to tackle another city? How did that work out?
Matterport kind of gave us the freedom to, we were like, all right, we could sell this anywhere, so why stay in New York? And I had been there my whole life, and we have family there and friends there. And so these were the people that we started to train on doing some scans. And once we felt comfortable with them handling, any incoming captures, that's when we felt like, okay, we can move somewhere else and, do the same thing over there.
Got it. So you and your wife had already built a small team of techs going out there and scanning and helping you guys uh, with the company in New York, and then you decided, okay, the two of us can now go and do the same thing, just kind of rinse, repeat in another city and grow the small team of people over there and train them up. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, and we didn't wait for it to fully mature, but it was just, I think, two capture specialists at the time, and then we went from there.
The marketing efforts that you had done in New York initially, you said, that you'd gone door to door and you kind of built a small reputation for yourself, for sure. Was there anything that you were doing to maintain that? I mean, obviously you're not physically there to go knocking on doors, but what about your online business were you doing to kind of keep that going?
I think one of the most important things was just having a website with enough information, so that when people go there, they have everything they need to decide, whether this is a good fit for them or not. And so there was all kinds of things in the beginning. We were doing brochures, going door to door. There was a lot of email campaigns, um, some digital advertising here and there, and that's kind of where we're at today. It's more advertising, and then a lot of incoming leads just organically through the website. 3 years in, we've kind of built a good reputation with our existing clientele that we're starting to see a lot of referrals come in from these clients.
You started with very simple kind of knocking on doors, literally going to an establishment, whether it's like a retail store, salon, gym. We talked about that, and just pitching the manager at the time at the store the idea, and then I quickly migrated to a website that's got all this information, probably examples of what you've done. Um, Tell me a little bit about the email campaign. How do you get those emails, and what are you using? Because a lot of our users, come from photography, for example, and they know that very well, and see themselves providing this as an additional service to their clients. But marketing is a challenge, and not everybody is as proficient as doing that.
Yeah, marketing is tough. There's so much trial and error that comes with it, and I think the most effective thing by far is still going to be to go door to door, and meet people face to face. That's been probably the most effective thing out there. Email campaigns work, but you know, you it varies. Um, there's so many parts to these email campaigns. One, you have to have good leads, and we would do this by walking through the city of Manhattan and collecting business cards from all the restaurants, from all the different businesses that are out there, and then compile a list of emails and then send out an email campaign to them. But if the email campaign itself doesn't have enough information, and then it leads them to a website that doesn't have enough information either, it's not as effective. So all the parts kind of have to tie in together.
For sure. Interesting. So getting all those emails, I mean, very much like pitching the idea initially, it's just like you said, going door to door and getting business cards and putting and just manually typing them into a into a list.
Yeah, it's time consuming, but it can work here and there. But I can't say that it's the most effective thing out there. There's enough people these days looking for the service that you really have to make yourself available and known, through a Google search.
Okay. So what do you mean by that? How does that happen?
Ads are pretty effective in that sense. Um, SEO is really important as well. There's a lot of websites out there for service providers that are just very basic, and they're just don't have enough information. And so this is something that we've been really working hard to accomplish over the last few months, is revamping our entire website. And it's still a work in progress, but the idea is that when you land on the website, you should have everything you need to make a decision. All the questions that can possibly come up need to be answered, because that's really your selling tool. Is it's you and then your website.
Yeah, you've got maybe 30 seconds to answer all their questions to get their attention before they move on and find somebody else.
Yeah, maybe less.
Maybe less, exactly. Okay, so focus on a quality website that can answer, all the client's question, whoever you're targeting, their questions and concerns. Talk to me a little bit about SEO. What have you done with your website to try and improve that?
One of the things is, including the word Matterport in there. It's become almost a household name in plenty of verticals, that there's enough people out there searching for a Matterport and not, virtual tour, because virtual tour isn't everything. You may be touring a residential property, but then you don't really need a virtual tour of a retail store. That's more of a, shopping experience. So then there's a lot of different terminology in relation to Matterport and 3D virtual tours and digital twins and all of that. But I think for people who are focusing on Matterport, they definitely need to make sure to include the Matterport branding on their website and just incorporate it within their own brand.
Have you done any research, with on your competition, basically, the others that are out there, and kind of seeing what they're doing to either emulate that or to kind of improve upon that, see what kind of search terms they're using?
Yeah, I think it's very healthy to keep a close eye on other companies that are doing the same thing and learn from them. If anything, VirtualSpace is kind of a culmination of dozens of other companies put into one. So kind of take the best qualities from everywhere. Yeah,
because in terms of like you were saying, the terms used and having Matterport be part of what your your content and your website, we do see that a lot of different terms are used, like you said, Matterport and virtual walkthrough and digital twins, and so it can get a little bit confusing. Have you done any kind of short or long form writing on your website, like a blog section or something like that? If not, is that something that you're thinking about doing?
We've experimented with it. Right now, it's not a public page on the website, but we have done plenty of blog posts in the past, and we plan on doing that again, just because it is very effective for SEO.
Are there any communities that you have become a part of to kind of, not so much aggressively kind of, say the name of the company and VirtualSpaces can solve this problem for you, but just more be there to answer questions and kind of, do more inbound marketing in that sense? Is that something that you found to be helpful?
Can you clarify the question again?
So I know a lot of times what some people will do is they'll get onto communities and forums where people in the industries that they're looking for. If you're doing a lot of construction, then you'll go into like a construction forum and just provide advice and just be kind of like this. I don't want to be too cliche about it, but beacon of information. Where you're not saying, "Oh, VirtualSpaces can help you with that," and not be so proactive about putting the name of VirtualSpaces out there, but more be like, "Hey, I'm this guy. I'm an expert in my field. I have all this information," and then people will just naturally gravitate towards you because of that. See you as an expert and say, "Hey, maybe you can help me out." That kind of thing. Yeah,
I mean, we've learned that when it comes to all these different verticals, there has to be an expert in each one. And, I've been working with my team closely on having each person handle an industry and be, the capture specialist just for that industry, because they're also very different from each other, and they all have very different use cases and very different clientele and just very different backgrounds. And so you can't have a company doing everything and being good at it without, breaking it down and specializing in all these different verticals. We've, been very active on forums and like the Facebook group, always keeping an eye on what's new in the industry and all of that. But we've definitely seen a lot of and work with a lot of companies who could use some kind of help, getting started. And so one of the things that we're launching very soon is something called Onsite, and it's basically a capture alliance where it's a little bit more than a community. It's more of just support and training, and the goal of it is to have a kind of a movement of capture specialists around the globe who want to work together to digitize this world, because that's kind of what we're all into these days. But there's just so many verticals like construction and architecture and engineering and insurance that we all need to learn a little bit more about, because it's going to be the next big thing, following up with residential. And so this on-site capture alliance I envision it to be, a community that really takes place in digitizing this whole world years from now, because there's Matterport, but there's also a lot of other solutions for 3D capture. Matterport, I think, is the best for interior, but then there's exterior, there's buildings as a whole. So there's solutions like Skydio, there's the BLK 360. So I think the industry needs a group of kind of capture specialists that could really work together to make this a reality.
That's great, and that's absolutely awesome. I love the idea of creating that network of capture techs who can kind of support each other, right? To kind of cover more than just a city or even country, as you said. In this case, you're looking really globally to have that network effect. That's awesome. So that actually brings me to another question. When we spoke, you mentioned that sometimes you'll get a job or a lead to scan something that isn't in a location that you have a technician. What do you do in that situation?
So over the years, we've worked with a lot of other companies throughout the nation and even globally. And so let's just say we were to get a request in an area that we've never worked in before. We'll reach out to a service provider in that area. Usually it's through a Google search. And from there, I'll go through maybe 10 websites, narrow it down based on the demos that they have on the website of their previous work, because there's definitely a difference in the quality of the work that's out there. And so we really try to have high standards when it comes to capturing these spaces. And so you can put two people in the same space with the same exact camera, but then the output is very different. The dollhouse isn't complete. It's got holes in it. Windows aren't marked, things like that. So that's really important for us and our clients. It's just to push the Matterport camera to its absolute limits. That's really what we like to do. And so, when we're looking for these service providers, we try to make sure that they are, at the top of their work in that city. And from there, we'll reach out to them and we'll say, hey, we've got an opportunity. And, this is what we're looking to get done. This is the quality that we're looking for. We'll share some examples of our previous work and just make sure that we're all on the same page. And 95% of the time, they are more than willing to take the job on, and we make a little something off of it, they make a little something off of it, and everybody's happy. And I think that the industry needs more of that, because you've got clients who have spaces all over the world, and they could use either a referral, or sometimes they just want to work with you directly and want you to kind of handle the management side of it.
Yeah. I mean, that's really the start of this network effect that you're talking about. I imagine once you've got someone who's done a good job, you've vetted them, right? I mean, they're officially added to your network of contacts, and anytime a job, it just kind of cycles. That's great. And I assume likewise, if they get a lead, they can rely on you and your team to provide that the scanning services for their lead. And again, you make something, they make something, and everyone's happy.
Exactly. And that's why I think everybody's businesses can grow if we all kind of work together to build these strategic alliances.
Yeah, exactly. Just expanding the network. So that's interesting. So if anybody wants to reach out to you, for example, I mean, okay, let's take a step back. We haven't talked about all of the locations that you are covered in. You have 10 techs out there?
12.
12 techs? Awesome. And where are they located? So you're in New York?
New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and South Florida. And then we work closely with probably a good 100 technicians throughout the United States, Canada, Latin America, some in Europe. We've done a few in Asia. So I mean, it's growing, but internally as a team of virtual space capture specialists, we've got 12 technicians, and I think about 14 cameras, because we have a few backups.
Mm-hmm.
And so
12 in-house technicians, and then the rest is this network effect that you're talking about, and you're working on expanding that so to really cover as much as possible.
Yeah, and all these capture specialists that we work with throughout the nation, some of them are new to Matterport, some of them have been doing it for longer than we have, but I've noticed just this trend of people focusing just on residential real estate and struggling to penetrate any other industry. And I want to help them, see that there's definitely more than just residential. You just have to understand the industries enough and understand the use cases that come with all of them. And then all these amazing solutions that are starting to come out these days, like virtual staging and wayfinding and AR integrations. I mean, there's so many exciting things happening with the Matterport SDK.
Yeah, for sure. The SDK is doing some amazing things. Partners are doing some amazing things by taking advantage of the SDK and APIs. That's interesting. Is that so? A couple questions. One, couldn't agree more. I think a lot of folks out there are definitely focused on residential real estate because that's still our biggest and strongest vertical, even though we're definitely making some massive headways into every other vertical in the life cycle, really, of any structure. So, whether it's construction and designing it or insuring it and even managing it, right? So all of those are covered, and Matterport can be used with that. How did you make that transition, right? I mean, we kind of touched on this, but you knocking on doors is one thing, but it doesn't seem to be as easy to go knock on the door of a construction company. How did you get into construction?
I actually had to, so this other company that we started called Virtual Asset Management. I partnered up with a friend of mine who had background in the construction industry. And that's kind of what I encourage people to do, is talk to people that are in these other industries so they could teach you a little bit about how it can be used. Because in the beginning, I didn't really understand, how does this benefit a construction manager? But speaking to my friend and, showing him all the different solutions that are out there, we put our minds together and realized, wow, this is a construction manager's dream, And so that's kind of how that started. But you could do this with everything. If it's a hotel and resort, maybe you have a friend who is an event planner or something like that, and they can tell you how it can make their day to day a little bit easier. And I think that's how you have to approach these things: is what does a working day look like for someone in a hotel and resort sales and marketing team? What does that feel like, their day to day? And once you understand that a little bit, you say, okay, well, so you spend 3 hours walking around the hotel, doing tours every day. What if you could do a virtual tour? How would that change your day? What would you do with these 3 hours? And that's kind of where you can understand some of these use cases and offer the value, which is either to save them time or make them money or save them money. I think that's what it comes down
absolutely.
to.
And you brought up event spaces. I can definitely see event spaces, wanting to present the space staged, but in several different ways, right? And that's where virtual staging can come in. I wonder, would you say it's better, different? How would you look at this? What would you say? To go kind of broad and scan everything and just pitch yourself as a scanning service that can meet anyone's needs, or find a niche like I scan event spaces and then I take it upon myself to work with the virtual stager like VRPM, Rumi, or doing it yourself through SDK programs like Treatise and who else do we have? We had Foria on the other a couple weeks ago. And then just kind of being the expert in that niche and just providing like the end-to-end solution for an event. What do you think would be maybe better for somebody who's just getting into this?
I think it depends on your resources and your background. Some people might come from an insurance background, and if that's the case, I would encourage them to just focus on insurance and nothing else, because it's an open industry. So if you have background as an adjuster or something like that, and you just get the ins and outs of the industry, you can probably figure out use cases for a Matterport digital twin that no one else can and no one else has really thought of. But I don't want to say don't focus on any other industries. I think people should be open to doing all types of captures, because at the end of the day, they are very similar in terms of how you scan them. It's just how you educate the client on how to use them is really the only difference. But as far as scanning techniques, they don't vary too much. They are definitely different, but if you can master one of them, you can probably figure out the rest of them.
Cool, great. Speaking of scanning techniques, I saw that we did have a question. Before we get into the Q&A, I wanted to get to that. So we do have a couple of questions here that I don't want to miss out on. I'm going to send out this poll to everybody because this is such a new format. You can go ahead and check that out. I'll just leave that running for a while. Very simple poll. So please, if you don't mind, take a minute. Okay, so let's go ahead and tackle some of these questions. Basm, thanks so much again. This is really great. So you were talking about scanning techniques, and I know we talked about this a little bit. Scanning for residential real estate, even within, I would say, residential real estate, whether the structure, the apartment building, whatever, is furnished or not. I imagine the scanning is a little bit different. So how would you say that, like, I guess, I don't know, I don't want to say like what the difference is. It's hard to, but how would you say the best way to go about, perfecting one's skills in the vertical that they're going after? What should they do to what are they looking for?
I think one of the first questions to start with is, how is this being used? And we always ask that for any job that we're capturing. So even if it's residential, you still have to ask, how are you going to use this? Some people don't care for pictures, for example. Maybe they hired a photographer already and they just need a virtual tour. And so if that's the case, the style of capturing it is going to be a little bit different because you don't have to, set up the camera in certain angles so that you're taking good still photos. For example, if we're capturing a bathroom, we lower the camera pretty low because when it's a small space like that, the camera has to be low enough to take a good photo without kind of pointing down at the toilet and sink and all of that. And so if they need photos, we lower the camera in specific spaces like bathrooms and kitchens and things like that. Whereas if they don't need photos, then the camera is pretty much at one height throughout the whole scan.
And do you set the height differently? You just mentioned you do it different for photographs, but what if the use case is not promote? What if it's not real estate? Like for construction, is there a different height for the camera in that situation?
Absolutely. So some clients prefer that the scans are very detailed. And so, that's part of our kind of onboarding process for any new client is figuring out just what does this look like for you? Like who's using it and how are you using it? And so we have a client who wants scans to be 4 feet apart, as opposed to the average of maybe 6 to 8 feet. And so those scans take us almost double the amount of time to capture, but the amount of detail that's in there, ensures that there's nothing that's missed in the space. And so, that's something that you have to price differently. You have to plan for differently. You have to have enough technicians, things like that. So it really varies with every industry. Retail, for example, you have to figure out how they're looking to use it. And if they're using it for e-commerce type of solution, you want to position the camera to be in front of all these products. Sometimes you have to scan maybe an aisle in 2 different heights, one of them being very low so you can see the products on the bottom, and then another one right next to it with, a bunch of scans that are a little higher up to see some of the other products. So it's definitely very different for every industry.
Interesting. That's great. Okay, so let's tackle some of these questions here. So Brandon asks, what are some tips and tricks you have to make the scan as efficient as possible?
I think one of them is really, as I mentioned, to ask what it's being used for, because you don't want to, unnecessarily scan some things that you don't need to. Maybe it's an end use case where the client doesn't really need that much detail. It's just for reference. And so you can space your scans out to save some time. There's really, it really depends on the industry. Planning it out is always good. Having a floor plan before you actually go on site kind of gives you an idea of how you want to approach the scan.
Is that something that you would say is I guess common? Because I know some of your models are very large, right? Some of these gyms, some of these construction sites are very large. You would ask the client, do you have a floor plan of this or a blueprint or something like that I can work off of? And then you can actually better understand the path that you're going to plan on taking without even visiting the site?
Yeah, we definitely like to ask for floor plans, especially for some of these larger spaces. And it definitely helps. And sometimes you want to do a site visit before you actually do a scan, just so you have an idea what to expect. You could run into a site that needs April tags to make scanning a little bit easier, or prepping the space, having a checklist for the contact that you're dealing with, the on-site contact, so that they can prepare the space for you, so that you don't have to do anything when you get there. That helps a lot because downtime is a pretty big thing in this industry, where you get to a space and they're not ready, and you sit there for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour before you could even begin. I think another great tool to have for some of the larger spaces. I don't recommend it for residential, but it works for a lot of other things. Is a tripod dolly. Those can
Yeah. Basically, just set up for anybody who's not familiar with that. It's just like a little set of wheels for a tripod. Tripod just sits right on top of it, and you can roll it. Interesting.
Yeah, and you have to have a good iPad. It's worth investing in, the latest model. Maybe right now, if you haven't upgraded for a while, you might want to take a look at the new M1 chip iPad Pro that can last for years with Matterport.
Yeah, and you find that the stronger iPads are allowing you to work your way through a space faster.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So, a question here from Anonymous. Do you guys see any use in the construction and restoration industry? Huge. But I mean, what would you say to that?
Yeah, the biggest thing is construction progress monitoring. A lot of companies have a need for that. Just imagine in the past year with COVID and everything, this industry and the need for digital twins kind of jumped 5-10 years. A lot of people, don't want to go on site for whatever reason. This just makes things much, much easier. Sometimes it's one person that goes into a space and then they take literally 1,000 photos and put them into a folder and then share that with everybody else. But you have to sift through, this slow folder that's got, all these photos in it just to find what you're looking for. And then it's not the angle that you need to see exactly what's going on in there. And so these tours really make it 100 times easier to understand what's going on in a space today, So there's definitely a need for the construction industry.
Do you know, maybe you're not even sure of this, but I was just wondering, do you know if your construction clients are using, some of the, last scans in the process of building out the structure? Are they using that to pass on to essentially their client as facility management tools?
They are. We've had, they definitely are. You do kind of want to give the final as-built to the client, and this is really a perfect way to deliver it. You can tag, all the different assets and, all the materials and the equipment and all of that in there. And that's something that I think people haven't really tapped into just yet is, really utilizing the matter tags. And I know that with the SDK and the API, it's going to just become even more robust with time. But I think 95% of the tours out there are just very plain, and they don't really have any of these matter tags and some of the additional features that can just add so much more value to a tour.
Is that so? Tagging, is that something that you charge more for? Do you offer that as an additional service? I'll add all these matter tags, and it'll, I don't know how you price that out, but
yeah. I mean, we've experimented with different pricing models for it, but I think something simple like $5 a tag works for a lot of people. Sometimes it could be a bit confusing and time consuming to do it. So you can also just give them collaboration or just editor access through the Matterport workshop and just give them a brief on how to do it themselves, either through training them directly or, the Matterport website has some great resources on all these different features. So you could just share the link and it'll show them step by step on how to add a matter tag. Because sometimes, they want it in a specific space. And just from their eyes, it's always comes out as a better product when they tag it themselves.
Yeah. So it's really a very customized package with a good amount of detail. Like, do you want tags? Okay. Do you want us to add the tags? Do you want you to add the tags? And the pricing. It sounds like pricing models can get very complicated.
Yeah, they definitely do, and it varies with every industry. There's just so many factors that fall into play when it comes to pricing out a commercial space? Is it, what's the size of it? Is it vacant? Is it furnished? Are there people on site? Are you doing it after hours? What else? How many models are we doing? Things like that all play into the price.
Have you worked out some kind of like an algorithm that people would be able to like plug in, answer some questions and it just spits out
Yeah.
something to at least get them started on your website? Or do you find that actually posting pricing on your website is not a good way to go and you'd rather sit down with them and show them and talk to them?
No, we're all about transparency, and one of the things we've been using internally, these calculators, but very soon, probably in the next week or two, every single industry page is going to have a robust calculator that you enter the number of floors, you enter the square footage, you enter how many spaces it is, you enter the add-ons that you want, whether they're pictures or adding your logo to it, or linking these 10 spaces in this commercial building with a menu so that you're not sharing 10 different links, but just one link. All these different things, you're going to be able to input that into our website, and all of a sudden you get an email with the total price.
Okay, let's go tackle a couple more questions here. What third-party apps do you use to enhance Matterport or link 3D tours with other spaces like exteriors, campuses, things like that? I mean, you just mentioned that so that your client can provide just a single link or use one link. You've got like a menu. That's a good example. What third-party apps and programs are you using?
So we're working on our own solution right now, but in the meantime, we've used pretty much everything out there. Treatise, MP Embed, Captured. There's probably a good dozen solutions out there that all do very similar things. But I definitely like using Treatise, and I recommend people to check that out. It's a great solution.
Yeah, Treatise. They're doing some amazing things. We had them on a shop talk. Very, very impressed, especially if you want to get into the niche of e-commerce and scanning retail. They definitely have that nailed. So Anonymous asks, where can we join this new on-site alliance? Is that something that's live?
Yeah. If you go to our website, virtualspace.us, there's a banner on top that you can click on, and that'll take you to the main website for it's called the On-Site 3D Capture Alliance. And it also has its own website, which is on-site, site as in vision, .global. So on-site.global. If you go on there, there's a form to fill out, which you can enter your information, your experience, the equipment that you have, locations that you're in, and we'll reach out to you from there.
So John asked, would love to hear some tips or advice for someone in the Xactimate insurance and claim industries. Have you done any insurance work, or mostly just construction?
We have. We've done a good amount of insurance work, not so much on the Xactimate side, but it's something that I have someone from my team studying closely, and also looking through the certification from Actionable Insights, so that we can be experts in that as well. But I definitely think it's a growing niche right now, and it's a really good one. They definitely have a need for it.
How important is Google Street View publishing for small businesses, and what is the best way to do it? Is it possible to enter through the front door directly from GSV? That's a good question. Do you have experience? I mean, obviously you've worked with all these retail stores, the spas and the gyms. Do you offer GSV as part of the package?
Yeah. It's one of the greatest add-ons you can possibly do. I mean, we charge a small fee of $50 to publish it to Google Street View, and 90% of the time our clients, say, sure, why not? It's a great little add-on that takes less than 5 minutes for you to publish. So I highly encourage it. It definitely strips it down to the, Google Street View standard, which is something you should make your clients aware of. It's not going to be that you have a Matterport tour through Google Maps. It just kind of gets stripped down to the same Google Street View standard with the little arrows and all of that.
Yeah. As far as, coming in through the front door, that's more up to Google, to be honest.
Yeah,
if
it's
it
not
makes that
possible.
connection, it's hit or miss. Do you have experience with leading scan positions out towards like the sidewalk and exterior area of the store, and whether that helps or not in getting that to work?
It's still going to be counted as a completely separate thing on Google's end, but we do have experience scanning outdoor, and if you could do it, I highly recommend it, because that's really one of the ways to differentiate your company from other companies, is pushing the Matterport tech to its absolute limits, which, as you know, it doesn't work in direct sunlight, but that doesn't mean you can't plan out your capture so that you do it when the sun is on the other side or during sunrise or sunset. And so, having these unique models that have outdoor spaces linked with them is just a great little added benefit.
So just another thing to keep in mind, if you're out there talking to a retail client who does want their model to go up to all the panels in their model to go up to GSV, making sure you're there at the right time of day to scan those exterior scans to make that transition hopefully happen. Any tricks to getting around the real estate restrictions with Google Ads and Facebook Ads? I'm not familiar with what those restrictions are. Do you have anything to say about that?
I think sometimes they may get flagged for, like equal opportunity, something like that. I have seen that in the past, but I'm not too sure.
Okay, so we are close to out of time. Izzy asks, what is your favorite industry to work in?
Retail is fun. Retail is definitely fun. I do like commercial because it's easy. I also love doing co-working spaces, but
like WeWork and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, retail is a good one these days.
That one you said was really, getting into that was just a matter of going and knocking on the door. Mm-hmm. Saying, here's an example, and here are all the cool things you can do with it. Maybe learn up on some use cases of how other retailers are using Matterport models, whether it's for e-com, facility management, or I don't know. I mean, what would you say?
There's definitely a lot of use cases on the resident or retail side. Like you said, people do use it internally. That's another question, to ask people. It's like, are you using this internally or using this externally? From there, you can kind of narrow down the use cases. Sometimes you're using it for both. And so, the style of capturing is definitely going to vary based on that.
Can you capture in a way that would allow you to provide for both, like over capture maybe, and then, here's the model that you would use for e-com, but here's another model that you could use for your facility management team. And essentially you just had to scan once.
Yep, we've done that before. And you just upload a duplicate of it and, rename it and disable certain scans, things like that.
Great. So you get like twice the use case for just the one-time scanning. Cool. So, okay, we are unfortunately out of time. There was one last question here about lighting. From Kyle. From a beginner's perspective, what are some tips for lighting? Blinds open, closed, things like that. Lighting, I know, can definitely be an issue.
You always want, natural lighting. That's the best. But if you are dealing with like a pretty dark space, you can buy a portable light that you can Velcro on top of the Pro 2 camera, and they work pretty well. You can find them on Amazon by searching up like LED video light and just finding something that has a flat top so that you can place it on top of the camera. So that works pretty well, but the camera does a really good job of balancing lighting. Sometimes you'll do a scan and you look at the preview in the capture app and it looks really dark, but then when it processes, it looks great. So always keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Sometimes what you can do is if you have an internet connection in this area, do one scan, upload it, see how it looks. It'll take maybe 15, 20 minutes to process.
One last question here from Sophia. What would you say is the biggest reason most people buy virtual tours? What is your best sale clincher?
I mentioned it before, save time. Yeah, if it saves them time or if it saves them money, it makes sense for them. That's pretty much what every product or service comes down to, you know?
So saving time and money. So in the retail use case, if it's e-com, they can potentially sell more product.
Yeah, save time, money, or make more money, of course.
Yeah. Getting familiar with a retail store. If it's like a restaurant, users, who go and Yelp your establishment would like to maybe familiarize themselves with the layout and what it looks like, and if that environment is right for the special occasion they have in mind, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Just imagine you are trying to, host some kind of private event. Maybe it's a birthday, and you've got 10 people in your family, and you want to book some restaurant in downtown. And you go on the websites for the top 5 restaurants, and some of them have pictures, some of them have floor plans, and then one of them has a Matterport 3D tour. Just like that, you immediately understand, okay, this is what the private events dining room looks like. And if the establishment is making it easier for you to decide, that's probably what you're going to go with. And Yelp doesn't really allow Matterport, but you can probably add it in the description. But there's another way to get past that, which is add it to a QR code, and then add the QR code in the photos section, and then just have people scan it from their phone.
Yeah.
There's lot of
usually,
yeah, there's
exactly. There's usually a way of, get creative a little bit with it. And there's, even though not all companies support having the Matterport model embedded on their own website in iframes or whatever, there's a way around it. Whether it's a link or having a QR code as an image, that's a really great idea. That's awesome. Brilliant. Okay. That's been extremely helpful. I think I found that helpful. I definitely learned from that. So I really, really appreciate the time today. Basm, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always nice to talk Matterport with, people who are familiar with it and actually have a love for it. There's a lot of sometimes negativity within the industry. Maybe people are just struggling and they're just not happy with not having enough work. But I think if people can work together, there's enough people out there that need our help, and are willing to pay for it. You just have to make yourself kind of known and available.
Yeah, absolutely. And this network that you're working on, this is also is this gonna be a place where people can come to get like tips and tricks and helpful advice maybe on how to crack some industries and get in there?
Absolutely. That's really the intent of it, is so that we all become just experts in every single field and just share knowledge with each other, and be responsible for digitizing the world, years from now, because eventually it's going to happen. Every city, every space within every city is going to be, it's going to have a digital twin copy of it. So I just want to be, responsible for leading this kind of movement where all of us can take place in this, using amazing technology like Matterport and everything else that's out there to make that a reality.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I personally couldn't agree more. I definitely think this is where things are going by creating a digital twin of a structure of a building facility. You really how you work with that and what you can get out of it is just so much more. So I definitely would agree, and that's where things are going, and I love it. I think it's awesome that you're kind of taking it upon yourself to create this network and really help out and push this effort. So brilliant, and thank you for all the really great questions. Super appreciate your attendance and helping me out with this poll. And looks like we got some awesome feedback. So we'll do this again. We'll bring somebody on and get them. So really appreciate it. And again, Basm, hope you have a fantastic rest of the day. And same to you all.
Thank you.
Take care.